Folks, this is Davey D, Davey D Cook, who man I've known since 1986 at Eshelman Hall Library at Cal, where he lorded over us all, but that's another story for another time. Davey, I want to talk about, first of all, from your perspective, what's going on in Oakland, where it feels like, and I'll ask this question, and you tell me if you think that I'm wrong, is black culture under attack?
Well, yeah, definitely black expression is under attack. I don't think it's anything new to Oakland. Unfortunately, I think what's happened is that the racists that have always been here have been aided by new people that have been moving here. And these are new people that they've been actively trying to recruit to come to Oakland for a couple of decades now. It really started to take hold when Jerry Brown did his 10K plan. And sadly, there were many people, including a number of black folks, who cheered him on. And they cheered him on for a couple of reasons. I think the cheering was short-term. There was a lot of crime. Oakland was one of the 7 cities in the U.S. that had been hit by the crack epidemic. Most people think this was a nationwide phenomenon, but it was really 7 cities: New York, D.C., L.A., Philly, and Oakland, unfortunately, was one of them, and happened to be a main stopping point for the whole CIA crack endeavor, which, if you ever read Dark Alliances, that whole operation, a big part of it was out of San Francisco.
Yep.
But that's important to note, because that means that you have government interference on a couple of levels. In some ways, you have a blind eye being turned, and a systematic blind eye, something that goes all the way up to the top, where people are kind of like saying, these people who we're allowing proliferations of drugs to come into the community and all these other types of things, we will not invest, and we will not try to solve the problem. In fact, we'll blame them for the problem. And you saw that play out with Jerry Brown. So when you had a city that's majority black population, and you're saying, I want to bring 10,000 new residents to downtown Oakland, the question that I always ask is, did he go to Atlanta to get some of those 10,000 people? Did he seek some of those 10,000 people in Detroit or Houston, places that have large black populations? He didn't. He wanted to go to the suburbs, White Walnut Creek. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I worked for Jerry Brown on the 10K. I brought developers here. You're absolutely right. And when I worked on the Super Bowl, afterward I accused Jerry of being racist, and that was actually published by Chip Johnson, who thought I was being funny, and he didn't contact me to ask me why I said that. But I just want to get that out of the way for anyone watching or viewing who might look up later and say, hey, Zinni worked for Jerry, how come he didn't say anything? Right. I'm on the record with that problem, but go on. Sorry.
Yeah, but we both know Jerry for a long time. I've known him for a long time, and so these are frank conversations that were had. Mm-hmm. And the point that I'm getting at is, and the reason why I'm painting this picture is so that people clearly understand that there for a long time had been a population in Oakland that felt like there were too many black people, and the goal was, how can we get rid of them? So this comes into the next phase. I want to say in the mid-'90s, late '90s, you started seeing a lot of churches and a lot of black civic organizations suddenly be bombarded with these conversations, and too good to be true offers for folks to move out of Oakland to places like Antioch. And me being on one of the top radio stations in the city, in the Bay Area at that time, I remember having, unfortunately, some of these people on that would tell us, like, you can get a 5-bedroom house in Antioch for $150,000. And at that time, the way it was sold to people was that you should leave Oakland and you can go to the suburbs and you can get rid of the crime. Leave the crime behind. There were many people who were younger, who sold their parents' houses and bounced to Antioch. There were other people who really were in the middle of a high crime area and thought this was a thing to take advantage of. We later found out that this whole push, which then led to subprime lending, and all this other stuff is documented by a former prosperity pastor preacher. Her name is Deborah Mumford, where she talks about these deals that were cut with some of the banks, including Wells Fargo, including Bank of America, for them to come and speak at churches in particular, and using that backdrop as a place where people would trust, and then to sell people a false bag of goods, which was, sell your home, bounce out, and then many of those people who bought homes found that they were subprime. So that's a whole other conversation, but I'm just trying to paint a picture that those types of things contributed to a decline in the population here in Oakland. And then that's coupled with rising real estate prices, which I think we all know many of them were artificially set, initially at least. And so, to go back to the Jerry Brown 10K plan, you now have the table set for this dream come true of 10,000 new people who would be, quote-unquote, acceptable to the masses. And, a lot of tech people, a lot of people with money, and they started flooding into the city of Oakland. One thing that I think we should remember is when Jerry was pushing the 10K plan, the other way that he sold this was using culture, which is where we're going to double back to your initial thing about culture being under attack. If you remember, in downtown Oakland, there were all these buildings that a lot of artist friends that we have, many of them white, some black, but a lot of them white, who were, living in these places that were dirt cheap. Some of them damn near were paid to live there. Places that now would go for $1 million plus, right? Yep. So you had this whole community that were living in quote-unquote sketchy areas, and that was held up as a model for what Oakland could really be about. So initially we were sold on the dream that the 10,000 people coming to Oakland would be the artist type, which would add to what everybody thought was the fabric of Oakland. Right. And then it just quickly switched. Then it became a real estate thing. Many of those artists, not only are they no longer downtown, they couldn't even afford to live in Oakland now. But that's how it was made digestible for people. And now this new crowd of people that want to now make this the new Uber City or whatever euphemism that they make, they come from places.
Let's call it Uberville. How's that?
Yeah, Uberville, right. So they come from places that now, when you look at it, they're not from the Bay Area, many of them. Many are coming from the Midwest, many are coming from back east. They bring with them an attitude where their cities are segregated, there's racial hostility, there is an understanding that black people are beneath them, and they've been sold the idea that by coming to Oakland, they would be improving Oakland by their very presence. So they bring that baggage here, and this is where we're at the crossroads, and this is where the tensions are being fought. So folks are, acting like they're in Boston somewhere, where blacks are suspicious. Well, this is in Boston, and we don't have that relationship with the majority of people. Again, there is a small vocal minority that has held that position, and they have conveniently aligned themselves with that sort of attitude and those sorts of people, and have given them and laid down groundwork for them to have some sort of inroads into the city, and we're seeing it play out. And also there were people from San Francisco that came over here with the same attitude. Not the people of color that I think there's a lot of folks of color in Oakland now from Frisco, but there was also that same attitude with some of the Friscoans that also felt like not only was Oakland a place to avoid, but if they came here that they would be making the city better because of their either affluence or ethnicity.
Now, I'm curious, well, for my viewers who are seeing this for the first time, can you talk about some recent incidents that have become linchpins for this? For example, the drumming issue and maybe others that I'm missing. Also, the number of African Americans that have been killed by the police in Oakland of late.
Well, let's start with the police. There was an 18-month period where there was no police officer involved shootings in the city of Oakland. I think there might have just been one. An officer shot somebody in the face. That person survived, but that was something that was, the guy didn't do anything, to be honest, in that situation. But that was the only incident. Now, since the beginning of the year, starting with the election of the mayorship of Libby Schaaf, her first day in office was spent with the police. And many of us felt that sent a message. And that message was like, look, do what you need to do to clean up this city. And, there's ways in which you can look at that. You can clean up the city by really going after the people who are problematic, and I think nobody would disagree with that. Or you can start to get a paycheck by harassing people and then using those numbers to say, well, we went after Zinni. Zinni was in a bar talking too loud. We went after Dave. Dave was walking his dog. Or we've gone after some drummers that are in the park celebrating the Red Moon, which happened a couple of weeks ago. And you send out 13 police officers and 8 squad cars at the behest of one individual who wasn't even from Oakland but decided he didn't like drumming, and he didn't understand that people always came out on special ceremonies, winter solstice, summer solstice, full moons, and they drum. That's a cultural thing that is going on here that's not limited to African Americans. But the police response kind of indicated the tone that many people feared and felt was happening, which is like, look, go ahead and shut down any of these problematic people. So
13 cars? That's what boggles my mind. Why 13 cars? That's what I want.
Well, that's the question that everybody's asking. Now, prior to that, there's a neighborhood, a place in North Oakland where a family has lived there for 32 years. Many of the people in that neighborhood have been priced out. And so they still come to church and they still come to Oakland for different things. And usually on a Saturday or Sunday, they will stop by that house and hang out because that's still the last house on their block. In recent weeks, neighbors have formed some sort of committee, put out an open letter, and then started complaining that, the people are drinking beer on their stoops. They didn't like the gathering of people. They think the people there are suspicious. There was a killing there that happened not too long ago, and they somehow connected that killing with the house, which they had nothing to do with. But the point that we're getting at is that, again, that attitude, and that attitude of suspicion, which leads to tension. So, there were a number of people that saw this open letter that the neighbors had written, and then it was published in the Chronicle, and there were a number of people that pushed back and said, how dare you? How dare you put this out? And that was a very cowardly thing. And instead of talking to your neighbors and learning them, they decided to do something that was, if you can excuse my language, a chicken shit move. Mm-hmm. And then it got supported by those institutions, the Chronicle, the powers that be. There were folks that were praising, like, this is how the neighbors should act. No, the neighbors should act by going up and talking to folks. If you feel there's a problem, getting to know people and not treating people who've been in your neighborhood for longer than some of you had even been born as suspicious.
Hey, I ask you a question on that. How much of this is a problem born of internet and mobile culture? That is, people communicate with their segregated friendships through devices. They don't look up and talk to you anymore, which I think is really frightening. And also, people get on Nextdoor and they Emmett Till lynch mob people in Oakland now. I'm just, how much of that the problem is born of technology?
I think people in the shadows feel that it, gotten comfortable with just saying things, and and there's community online, so that community can take some of those sentiments that would never be uttered in public and put them into action. So that becomes a problem. But, it works both ways. So you take the drumming incident in Oakland. So you had somebody that jumped up and said, they didn't like drumming. Police show up 13 deep. Then you have people like Chip Johnson, the editor, one of the columnists for the Chronicle, come and chime in and then talk about the rules. And that gets echoed by the folks. The rules. Well, here's the deal.
That was irresponsible on Chip's part.
Right. Well, here's the deal. There on the signs is a municipal code that says you must have a permit to come into, to bring instruments into the park. That municipal code was actually wrong. You don't need a permit to come into the park, and there was no reason for those signs to be up. And when it was pointed out, initially people said there are no signs, but I live here and I'm a journalist and I chronicle this. So I went and took pictures of all the signs, sent it to them, and those signs had to be removed. But what is a municipal code is you're not allowed to have your dogs in the park anywhere near the lake. And it's not because the dogs are noisy or messy. It's because, in theory, the park is a bird sanctuary.
Right.
Now, I could easily get on my phone right now and start calling the police and say there's somebody walking their dog around the lake. There's somebody walking their dog on the grass. I could easily make the case that, I have kids that are running around and they're falling on dog poop. Or, or it's messing up my experience. But see, that would be picayune. That would be kind of whack, and that would be a waste of resources. But people can, and people did talk about, if this was going to be the type of environment that we live in, where folks are going to start looking at cultural events that happen every so often and start complaining when you live near a park, then we can do that too. We can all get on the phone and we can all talk to King's English and say, excuse me, officer, there's somebody with their dog in the park and it's against the Oakland Municipal Code. It's also against the law to use profanity. So we can start going down the list. And I think that would just be a tit-for-tat type of thing that would go nowhere fast. Meanwhile, we would really have some real problems that need to be addressed. But that's the type of game that some people want to play. And what you need at that point is leadership, which I haven't seen in earnest. Leadership that doesn't do like some of the city council did initially, which was hide behind the rules, versus sitting there and saying, you know what, there is absolutely zero tolerance for this type of reaction to culture. There's absolutely zero tolerance to racism. And folks would say, well, they can't just do that. And I would argue, yes, they can. Let's take the point of sanctuary cities, which have been around for a couple of decades. One person got shot and killed, and the next thing you know, you had elected officials falling over themselves to be on record to say, I'm against sanctuary cities, emergency measures were passed, and a litmus test was set up for politicians to, show where they stood. Are you for sanctuary cities? Are you for, white women being shot by, out of control folks who are here undocumented, numerous times? Where do you stand? And people are like,
well, Latinos,
count me in as somebody who's against sanctuary cities. So when the pressure's on them, they will move in a direction that they need to, or they feel they need to.
Yeah, if I may, just not to interrupt, but just let's put a real face on it. It was a white blonde woman who was shot by a Latino who was down on his luck. If it had been an Irish waitress who had visa problems shooting at another Irish waitress, we wouldn't have heard much about it. Go ahead.
Yeah, so that's pretty much it. And I'm only using that as an example to say that elected officials, in that case, have been praised for exercising leadership in terms of looking at a problem, seeing that this problem took a fateful turn, and they have stood up and said, we will correct the problem by getting rid of sanctuary cities. We see the same thing with guns. So you have Gavin Newsom sitting on TV talking about let's have some sort of real strong gun control based upon the shootings that took place outside of the state, right?
Right.
So where's the leadership when it comes to racism? Where's the leadership when you can go on Nextdoor and see all types of heinous things being said by Oakland residents? Where's the press conference to say, as mayor, city council, or whatever position you own, like this sort of thing will not be tolerated in the city of Oakland? If we find that it's you, we don't want to do business with you. We don't want to dance with you. We don't want to engage you. And we stand solidly behind the citizens who are victim to that sort of racism. But you haven't seen that. And if anything, you've gotten silence, or you've gotten a sort of a wink and a nod, like keep doing what you're doing, because it's leading to more of these people moving out, or being upset, or not really engaging us in a way that may push the envelope to help them, but instead they're reacting to the actions of people who aren't even elected officials. So I often tell people, I don't care what you want to say on Nextdoor. You can say that all day, and I don't care what your feelings are about me. What I am concerned about is who greenlight the police to answer one call with 13 cars. You know, that's what I want to know. Who made that decision? Who's the policy decision maker behind that? And how do we hold them accountable? Who put up those signs? Who greenlit those signs? Who looked them over and said, that looks okay to me, let's put that up there? These are the people that we hold accountable. And you know, and I think that's where most people are. And I'll just say this as I'm closing. One of the other places that have been attacked have been black churches, right, where people have been complaining about the choir. They found a black face for the one official complaint. You know, somebody said he's lived there 11 years, and after 11 years, he decided to, you know, file a complaint with the city, which most people think is BS and think he's a front. You know, and we also know that there have been numerous complaints. Humanist Hall is one that has been cited, and Humanist Hall is nowhere near residential community. So we understand that this is about real estate, this is about power, this is about something else. So today, people from all over are going to hold church in the streets in West Oakland to make the point. They'll be doing their choirs, they're going to do everything out there in the streets. And that's where your city officials should be at. That's where they should be sitting there and saying, you know what? These sorts of expressions are welcome. You know, they're welcome along with drumming circles, they're welcome along with dansa, they're welcome along with Shitak, which I think is a Jewish holiday that just took place a few days ago, where people were next door, you know, out in the streets dancing as they came to the end of their celebration. It's where we're going to have Day of the Dead. You know, we can go down the list of all these cultural expressions, and when you move to a city like Oakland, and you live near places like the lake, that's to be expected. The same way, and again, I come back to the dog example. I live near a park. I'm not going to complain about dogs. I live near the lake. People ride their bike. I'm not going to call up and say bike riders aren't stopping at red lights. And nor am I going to get mad if a biker happens to be riding in front of my car, which I find enormously annoying. But I live near a damn lake, and, you know, and that's what bikers do. You know, they're going to ride their bike. And you know what? Occasionally, because the lake is very popular, I'm going to hear some noise from people having parties and loud conversation, and, you know, and you suck it up and you deal with it and you keep it moving. If I want quiet, you can move to another neighborhood, or you can move out, you know, out the city to a place like Kensington, where the culture is we are quiet, and then I would be expected to follow the norms of the neighborhood.
I got a question for you, because I know your time is short, but I appreciate it. But as we're moving into a political season, and a number of council seats, 1, 3, 5, and 7, are up, what do you want to see? What do you want to see in terms of the persons running, or who should we not back? Your thoughts?
Well, I'm not going to go on record and make an endorsement or non-endorsement, but I do think people need to have full political pressure on everybody, and it needs to be made known, which is why I wouldn't put an endorsement or non-endorsement. Nobody should feel like their seat is safe. You know, nobody should feel like they got it locked up. I think when you start going, yeah, I'm going to back this person, and they start to take you for granted. No, you're going to dance with me all the way to the day of the election. Your vote will have to be earned, and it's going to be earned by the way that you exercise leadership. People should be looking at what stances have you taken, because many of these seats will be up in 2016. So we have a year to look at what you're putting into place. And I would argue with people that they start looking at policy, because this isn't like Congress where maybe you can argue it takes a long time. We have a year to see what bills did you propose, you know, what measures did you back, what policies did you really help mold that would be inclusive versus exclusive. And then you start to weigh in on that in terms of, you know, holding your vote or withholding your vote. And I think some of those seats need to be challenged, and I can say safely that some of them absolutely will be challenged. The
mayor is also my god sister. Could you talk to her? Because I've talked to her about this a lot over the years. But tell her, from your perspective, what she should do.
Well, I mean, you know, Libby Schaff, when I first met her, I met her at an event with, when Al Sharpton was here.
Right.
And she came up and she asked me, what do you think I should do if I'm running for mayor? What do you think? And I think I said then, I think you need to be inclusive, and you need to invest in the people that are here. And, the conversation kind of just, went along those circles, and I hadn't really talked to her that much. I think she made a decision, and I think it's one that, it's a wrong one. And the decision is that I'm going to get behind a power base that systemically sees poor people and people of color as potential problems. That they're not the wisest investment to make in the city. Like, we want to have tech people, we want to have affluent people, and basically make Oakland an extension of San Francisco. And in San Francisco, meaning that, the rich San Francisco, not the San Francisco proper. And so she's been silent, in some of these incidents. I think a mayor with strong leadership would have been standing up and doing exactly what I said. We stand against this, and I will walk with the people who have been victim to this. The fact that these types of crackdowns and these types of insults are being hurled at people who are adults, who aren't even kids. Not that that makes a difference, but I'm talking about, the drummers are people in their 30s and 40s. These aren't like young kids causing trouble, if you want to say that somehow that narrative would have made it okay. These are tax-paying homeowners that live and work and have been here in the city of Oakland just as long, if not longer, than the mayor.
Good people.
And so these are her classmates. These are her neighbors. These might have even been some people who even voted for her. And the shame for not standing up and walking and setting the tone. When you're the mayor, you do more than make policy. You also have a bully pulpit, and what you give voice to sets a tone. And I haven't seen that from the mayor. And nor do I think I'll see that for the mayor, because I think she's, to be honest, is quite comfortable with this sort of activity. Maybe she feels like those people, since they didn't vote for her or they don't say kind things about her, her attitude might be to hell with them, price you pay. And if that's the case, then fine, then, eventually there will be an opportunity to extract a political price from her as well. Even if she got reelected. Remember, Gavin Newsom learned the hard way when he angered a bunch of people and he ran for governor, and people dogged him on the campaign trail all the way up and down the state, reminding people of his record in the city and helped derail his chances. So those things can happen, but I mean, it shouldn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to come that far. It's just like you look at people, you see them as human beings, and you treat them accordingly. And racism and cultural intolerance should be something that's not tolerated in the city of Oakland. And until I see people really speak to that and enforce it and really aggressively go out of their way to make sure that there are places and spots and understanding being resurrected, then I'm just going to see you as being on the other side of the fence. And, and if that's where you stand, so be it,
How much more time do you have? Because I have one more question, but I don't want to...
Sure.
Okay. My question goes back to... I'll set it up this way really quick. I was in a meeting when I worked for L. Hugh Harris in 97. To make a long story short, Keith Carson, who's a friend, had said we have to concentrate on biotech, and they were talking about that tech. And I just jotted out, blurted it out. I said, hey, how about figuring out jobs for people who are in our city now who need them, rather than jobs for people that are going to just come from someplace else. We'll have this problem all over again, and I got silence. The only time we seem to have concentrated on developing a base of jobs that created the African-American base we have today was when Henry Kaiser developed shipbuilding. Why is it that we seem to actively avoid jobs that would hire more black folks, manufacturing jobs, which are still around the world, but they still exist? I don't get that about us. I don't get it.
When you say us, you talking about the city, or?
Yeah, the city and the county as well, even as officials.
Well,
and I pointed this out.
I think there's a disconnect in terms of what's happening. I also think that there is political dancing going on behind the scenes, because some of the things that could be built upon is pretty front and center. Oakland in particular is known around the world for its culture. Its music community is revered. I've been to places as far away as Beirut where people have been like, wow, you know, Hyro, Dell, Grammy nominated, you know. There's all these musicians, the Linda Tillerys, Valerie Trouts. I mean, you know, we can go on and on. There's just so many people, the Escovedos, that people are just revered. And one would have thought that a long time ago that there would have been investments made in just that aspect of the city. You know, how do you build a vibrant music community around the musicians that are here? Now, we've seen people do some tremendous things. Look at what Hyro has done with Hyro Day. You go to Hyro Day, you see 20,000 people showing up from all over the world. How is the city tapped into that? And some people go, well, we're into technology, but if you knew anything about any of these musicians, they're at the top of their field in tech. Talk to people like Domino. Talk to people like Tajay out of Hyro, and you know they got degrees from Stanford and are very well aware of that aspect. But there's been no investment. There's been no highlighting. I don't even know if it's featured in the Visitors Bureau as a thing that you should come see. So you can go, you might have, you know, come to New Orleans in the second week or third week of March or February for Mardi Gras, but you don't have, go see Hyro Day. That's a destination point, even though it's already de facto is. You have a lot of comedians and a lot of actors that have come out of here, people who have cut their teeth in Hollywood. You know, Mark Curry's just coming back here to the city. What's the investment in that vibrant community? Where are the clubs to showcase them? Where are their pictures on City Hall to say these are the alumni, these are some of the famous people that have come out of Oakland other than Tom Hanks, right? You don't see that. And so, to me, that says either there's a disconnect or, two, which I hate to think is the case, but it adds up that way, you really don't want to attract people. And I think I had this conversation with a city official not too long ago that was talking about, you know, how they like to highlight Oakland. And I was asking this person, I said, well, when you tell people about Oakland, what do you tell them about? And they were naming off all these new things. I said, well, what if it's my well-to-do cousin from Atlanta? What do you tell them about? And the only thing they could respond was pecan. And I'm like, well, what about, you know, what about Everton Jones? What about Pan-African Day? You know, what about, you know, this a dozen things. What about Eastside Arts Alliance? You know, what about the Panther Tours? You know, all these different things that would have made it. What about the Life is Living Festival, you know, put on by Brave New Voices? Brave New Voices has been featured all up on HBO. They had a reality show. They've been all over the country, all over the world. You know, we had a landmark poetry slam here. How is that highlighted? How is that infrastructure held up to high esteem to say this is something that Oakland should be proud of? It's not. You know, and, you know, yet you can have other cities, Atlanta and LA, come to mind that have built entire industries around entertainment and have made it not just a destination place, but also as a job generator. Today, you have so many jobs that can come out of here. Everything, you know, Pandora's here. You know, how has that been fused with leadership? How have people in leadership fused Pandora and the genius behind what Tim Westwood and them did with the vibrant music community here? I mean, some of this happens organically or it happens with people on their own, but it hasn't been because the leadership in Oakland has sat down and said, look at all these incredible assets. Let's put this together and maybe do something like have our own award show. You see what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
Let's have our own music hall of fame, you know, that could generate jobs. Let's have our own publication that highlights the things that we're doing. Let's put our own online entertainment hub. You know, those are things that you can marry all this sort of stuff. And yet that has not happened, and shame on the city for not doing that. And I say this as somebody who's had these conversations with people, you know, over the years about doing that. And I'm not one to sit back. Many of us have already done these things. Many of us have already established these type of hubs, these type of relationships with people, where there's a lot of back and forth between different cities or different communities about how we build and how we don't build. But that has not come with the knowledge or the full blessing of the city. Even with the Fox, what's the local Bay Area celebration of music that institution has? You know, under the push and suggestions and the love of leadership in Oakland. Just to highlight that. We're our own South by Southwest Music Festival in the city of Oakland. We have Pride Day. We have the Oakland Music Festival. We just had the Bay Vibes thing at the Shoreline. We have some of the best dancers that are known all around the world. They have a celebration there every year. But you've never seen cities sit those people down and say, let's bring all this up together and really make this a jewel of Oakland. That has not happened. And I put that fully on the square, on the feet of leadership. You know, some of them are younger, some of them are older, but they all lived in Oakland enough to know that if I can walk around and see these things, and you have people like an Eric Arnold who every week puts out articles on Oakland culture, just Oakland culture alone, you should be reading his thing and bringing him into a room and saying, Eric, how can we really take this to a next level? So it's not like you don't have assets or access to information. You don't want to have that information. You don't want to embrace that, and you don't want to take that to the next level of understanding. We won't even talk about the activism and the political grassroots work that people have, you know, that has resulted in a Van Jones being appointed to the White House, that's resulted in Mike McBride, you know, who does work being appointed to Obama's task force on policing. You know, we can go down the list just on that alone, but that hasn't even been put down to the table and said, how do we exercise that access? Where's the political school for Oakland? Where's the community activists Hall of Fame or workshops and all these types of things that would really demonstrate that the city holds this as joy? And this will be my last point. We went to Cal, right, as you mentioned. And when we were at Cal, one of the big turning points at Cal was the divestment movement, right? Yep. And so the divestment movement was a huge thing, and it played a critical role in helping, you know, take down apartheid, even though we were far away. Now, I remember very well because I was involved with that movement. First of all, there's a lot of people that came out of that movement, Pedro Noguera, you know, we can go down the list of a who's who. But
Ricardo, too.
Do you know, right? Yep. But you know what Cal now highlights as an asset for themselves? They highlight that the anti-apartheid movement, that divestment movement, came out of Cal, even though the administration was totally against it when it happened. So the irony of that is that, you know, like you will brag and say, you know, these people came out, but you were opposed to it. Yep. Now, we don't have to have a situation in Oakland where it gets to be...
Not opposed to it, they sent guns, man. Remember that?
Right, they said,
we're not talking about, oh yeah, we're against you. We're like, hey, wait a minute, man, we're going to shoot you.
Right. So they, you know, and the same thing that they highlight the free speech movement as well, you know, which comes before that. So why do, you know, I don't want to see the city of Oakland become a thing where 10, 15 years from now, you have people that are bragging about the Tonys came from Oakland, the Escovedos came from Oakland, Hyro came from Oakland, you know, Richie Rich and Too Short and Hammer all came from Oakland, when you didn't do a damn thing to really enhance their careers or lay down infrastructure so that, you know, entertainment or social wealth and actual economic wealth could all be shared by the city, who vibrancy gave, you know, inform their music and help them get their start. Well, not just help them get their start, lay down the groundwork for them to get their start and for people from other parts of the world to come to and get their start. But this is, you know, this again is, you know, do you really want to have this happen? That's really what it comes down to. Does Libby Schaaf want this to happen? I don't know. I haven't seen anything to suggest that she does. You know, otherwise she would be spitting what I'm spitting right now and would have been like, look, I got a whole bunch of plans for this, you know, and you've been here. You're a Skyline graduate. You know all this. You brag that you have been, you know, all around the city and know this. So this should be a piece of cake, and any other elected official should know that. I mean, it's common knowledge all around the world. You're in Atlanta right now.
Yep.
Go out in Atlanta and look at the exchange. Look at how many Bay Area people and all the back and forth that goes on between the Bay and Atlanta right now. And ask any of those artists in Atlanta what role the Bay has played in their rise. And every last one of them will tell you the Bay Area had a lot to do with what we're doing.
Yep.
You know, from the Two Shorts coming down there on up. And so you would think that you would be taking advantage of that sort of vibrancy and understanding, but that hasn't happened in the least. And you know, that's just a small part of the cookie. I think there's a taking of a lot of people taking Oakland for granted, or overlooking, or not fully realizing its impact around the world.
Now, this is going to be entirely uncut, 2 parts on video today. Davey, you're the man.
Thank you, Zenny. You
God
have a good one, brother.
God bless you.